I felt his power swirl around us, coalescing, writhing against the skin and air. My dress ruffled, and I could barely breathe past the fear that seized a brutal grip on my non-existent heart. Lee gripped my hand harder. I wish I could tell him that I feared for him more than I feared for myself. The earth shuddered around me, and the walls of the house groaned, compressing inward like a massive heartbeat. "Stupid boy," his words echoed in the depths of the home, resonating. Fire instantly leapt into life, feeding on the power Devon gave it, roaring upward. I gave a startled yell and threw my hand out to protect myself. Lee situated in front of me. "Enough, Devon," Lee whispered. His voice was calm, devoid of fear. "It's time to let her go." The demon melted through the wall, filling the shadows of the dilapidated home. They wrapped around him, squirming like the dead things beneath the soil. "You're mine," he growled. "You think your Karen feels pain each night?" He laughed. "She is nothing compared to the power at my disposal." Lee dropped to the ground, dragging me with him by the hand he held. "Lee," I gasped. There was nothing I could do. I watched him begin to shake, a fine trembling that started from his chest and traveled through his body. He released my hand as he let out an agonized scream. I watched his fingers begin to turn inward as the skin peeled away from them to reveal the bone, tissue, and sinew beneath. I let out a startled gasp. "Imagine this happening to your whole body," Devon said, slowly. The laughter in his voice turned my stomach as Lee screamed again. The splits from each finger converged into one spot on his hand before traveling down his wrist, splitting his skin away easier than a knife would peel an apple. I forced myself to look away from Lee's suffering and approached Devon. He looked at me, and the gaze of his merciless red and black eyes stopped me for a moment. Only the sound of Lee's pain stirred my courage forward. "Devon, stop this." "What are you going to do about it?" he scoffed. He flicked his hand, and I could feel the heat of fire begin to play against my feet. I swallowed, preparing to feel the pain. Nothing happened, but I could still feel the power caress my skin. Devon continued to warn me of his strength, but didn't he know that the 2 decades I'd spent beneath his torture had made me accustomed to it? The pain was all-encompassing, but something I would experience regardless of this outcome. Lee deserved better, and each of his yells stabbed more pain into me than Devon could ever inflict directly. Lee writhed on the floor as Devon's power played with him. There was no blood as his skin peeled away. There was nothing but the small ringlets of already curled pieces of skin that fell to the burned foundations. In that moment I knew that there was nothing I could do. If Lee was gone, there was nothing. "I'll go with you," I whispered, still looking at Lee. For him, I'll do anything. Just please let him go and return him to normal." "You'll suffer for eternity for him?" Devon demanded. I nodded, and I looked away and at Devon. Was I crying? Did tears run the length of my mask? I wasn't sure. I love him. Pain flashed through his eyes, and I remembered how there were once a light, sparkling blue, until he let hatred consume him. Why him? What did he do differently? "Devon." I swallowed, remembering what I had done in front of the school. I remember how he had collapsed on the gym floor, sobbing for a love I'd never felt for him. "Devon, I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Your apology came 2 decades too late," he muttered. Tears dripped across the shadow-swathed face and glittered. He gave a sardonic smile and snapped his fingers. Lee's yells cut off sharply as he returned to normal, leaving him shivering violently as he fell along his arms. "But at least I get to keep you." Devon held out a hand to me as the shadows wrapped around him. Kieran, the ghost of the pain he'd experienced at Devon's power, still shivered along his form. He looked from the place he'd collapsed at. "Kieran, please." I didn't answer him. I couldn't. I knew that again I was breaking someone's heart. This time my heart broke alongside his. I gripped Devon's hand before he could say anything else and let out a scream as the fire ignited around us both. Only one thought remained with me, the whispered verse from our song. "I cast away all for the truth. Sacrifice the sinning body for the redeemed soul. Allow me to return for my faith." Lee didn't look up as the bus stopped. Instead, he scratched out the messed-up music note. He waited until the bus lurched forward with an animalistic growl from the engine before he continued riding. Not that it mattered. In the 3 months since Devin had taken Kieran from him, all his music seemed disjointed and unusable. All he had was her song, which he kept trying to add to unsuccessfully. "Hi!" The voice, feminine and almost familiar, broke Lee out of his troubled thoughts, but he ignored her. "Do you play well?" Lee gave an involuntary glance toward the guitar case that rested beside him. He gave an indistinguishable grunt, hoping she would catch the hint. "You even write your music." There was laughter in her voice as she noticed the scribbled notebook page of music notes. "Will you sing for me?" For a moment her words didn't register, and then Lee was struck with familiarity. He looked up in excitement before disappointment rose in his throat. She was nothing like the newspaper picture he'd seen in the internet. Short black hair that flipped out in odd angles, freckles that dotted a small dainty face. Then she smiled and her emerald eyes glittered. Green eyes. A piece of Lee didn't believe it. Confusion flitted through her eyes, the gateway to a free soul, and Lee realized that he was gaping like an idiot. "Hi," he said as he leaned further in his seat. He watched her. He reached his hand out and she took it tentatively. The hand was small and familiar, and he felt a surge of excitement. He shook her hand before letting it go. "I'm Lee." "I'm Kira," she replied. "I just moved here, next door to you, actually, and I've seen you walking around." She tucked a piece of her short hair behind her ear. "You know, I play music too, and I just wondered, would you like to hang out with me later?" he asked. "You can bring your music and stuff, and we'll go through each other's work. I have the perfect place to hang out." Lee winked. "If you don't mind breaking a few rules." The expression that dominated Kira's face was expectant, excited, and mischievous. "What rule isn't made to be broken? I'd love to hang out. How about after school?" Lee nodded. "Sounds great." Kira smiled a secret smile. "Cool. Now you can teach me a new song."